Hey guys, welcome back. This is episode 11. It's the 25th of November 2020. This episode 11, is titled The Chaotic End of the Cheap Money Era. We're going from quantitative easing to quantitative tightening. This is going to have massive ramifications for the entire global economy. We're going to cover that whole macro environment, how private equity and venture capital pick clean the bones of what was once the American industrial economy. We're going to talk about the credit meltdown. Over $113 trillion has been put into the money system since 2009. This has all got to get tightened down and soaking up at this point. We're going to go through, we're seeing the U.S. economy roll over. We just passed midterms. I think you're going to see the economic stacks get worse and worse. We have layoff after layoff. The tech industry is laying off. We're going to cover that in the entire micro environment. We're going to also cover the Ukraine-Russia war. Russia has withdrawn from KHERSON. What's that mean? We're going to go through it. We're going to go through the next steps of the war and what's going to happen. So in addition to that, we're going to cover the just recent KMT victories in Taiwan and how that may lead to peace and stability over the Taiwan Strait issue. That and more. When we come back, let's get into the show.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
More problems domestically with their economy. Let's talk geopolitics for a second.
Hey guys, welcome back. So, we were talking about, as I mentioned in the intro, I was talking about the credit market. $113 trillion has been pumped into the global economy by the central banks. So, I'm sure you're all aware, in 1971, we went off the gold standard. We went into a fiat money system where they just print the money. This has just been increasing. We went from billion-dollar bailouts to trillion-dollar packages. So, 2008, it wasn't that long ago, we had $800 billion stimulus package to save the economy. Everybody was shocked. Wow, $800 billion, oh my God. $800 billion is nothing now. That's half of one of our packages that we've launched, like the infrastructure bill, or just slightly more than the CHIPS bill. So we are in the trillion-dollar package now. So money is becoming worthless. You see that through that inflation. We've had slightly downtick in inflation last quarter and here in the United States, but in general, inflation, once it gets that genie's out of the bottle, it's very, very rare to get taken back into the bottle within a few years. So it just doesn't stop quarter after quarter. We're going to see double-digit inflation until money's basically not worth anything. Maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years. So hopefully we don't accelerate. Where we're getting, where you see levels like in Turkey and Argentina that are, 90% a year, 100% a year. That's an entirely different level. That could the U.S. see it? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with all the money that's been printed, you have money printing on top of no economic base. So it's all consumption. It's all handout payments and consumption. So what happened in the last 20, 30 years in the United States from a macro point of view, and it gets very rarely it's talked about, is the private equity economy. I'll go real quickly through private equity and venture capital. Private equity are these banks, your Mitt Romney types, these guys that live off printed money. They take printed money, they go to a real company with real factories and real people, and they buy it out. But they don't just buy it with their money. They get the printed money from their banks. They buy out the company. They lay off the workers. They send the manufacturing to China. They just keep the distribution in the United States, and they do that without even spending money. So what they do is, as soon as they acquire it, say they put $50 million into the company, they then have the company take out $50 million in loans using their credit as a backstop, and then pay themselves dividends of $50 million. They literally spend nothing to acquire the company. This has been going on for 20 years, and it's completely hollowed out the industrial base of the United States. It's really a sin of the easy money printing. And now you're waking up to facts like, oh, we make 13 million cars a year. Geez, we made 18 million cars 20 years ago. So that's just one industry. So do we make a phone? No. Do we make a TV? No. Do we make clothes? No. What do we make? We don't make anything. We are globally, in the United States here, we're globally competitive in soybeans. Okay, that's the honest truth of the situation. What we did is when we got rid of all our factories, and you saw the worst in 2008, 2009, we lost over 50,000 factories. We created housing bubbles to make up for living standards. And then everyone went into buying houses, flipping houses. Everyone thinks they're rich. You've had housing go up 40% across the board in the last 2 years, up 100% in some markets like here in South Florida, in some areas. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's the same asset. You have now private, 20, 30% of the real estate loans were by private equity, BlackRock, companies like this, where they get the free money and at 0%, 1% interest and buy up real assets with it, then become landlord of hardworking people making $20 an hour. That's all flipped on its head now with the inflation. So now the cost of capital, these companies in private equity and venture capital, which I'll talk about in a minute, all now have an internal hurdle rate in finance, what we call it. They have to, now their cost of capital 7%. It was 0% or 1%. Now all of a sudden you can't just deploy capital all over the place and expect you're going to make money on these valuations. So the whole world's going to look different in an era of inflation where you have interest rates, federal interest rates, Fed rates at 5, 6, 7%. We don't know how high it's going to go this cycle. We'll see. But private equity model is going to completely change. Venture capital, another sin of the easy money, free money era of the last 2 to 3 decades, has been venture capital. You see Silicon Valley, this is all a house of cards. Even their unicorn companies that are successful, keep in mind 1 out of 5,000 are successful. The other ones just burn money. The Silicon Valley literally invented the term burn rate. What's your burn rate? These guys just get free money and burn it. They don't know how to make money. Even their unicorns, your Ubers and your WeWorks, they can't make money. So Silicon Valley is largely built on a fraud. They haven't been, what has Yahoo done in 10 years? What's Twitter done in 10 years? What's Facebook done in 10 years? These companies have been stagnating. And so I think we're all going to get a wake-up call on that. You've seen many of the Silicon Valley stocks crash 80, 90%. That could be just the beginning. So there's very few companies that are actually real money-making companies that add value and add productivity. So what in the last 20, 30 years has been rewarded in society is just being at the beginning of the Fed money printing funnel. If you're at the beginning and you got that free money, you can deploy it and become uber wealthy. Okay? It didn't matter if you know how to make money or not. That has all ended. Okay? We're starting to see serious deterioration in the credit markets. So in private equity, private credit markets right now, we're at an average of a B- credit. That's 70% of the market's B-, 20% of the market's triple C. Most of that credit market is heading down to triple C. So emerging market debt, emerging markets, these countries, the Argentinias, these are the Indonesias, the Mongolias, except Mongolia would be a frontier market. But basically your emerging markets, your BRICS, these guys have increased debt by 400% since 2015. Now we've come to the conclusion, what's just happened is the dollar has been destroying all the emerging market currencies. So some of them are down 80%, 90%, like Argentina against the dollar. Turkey down 90% against the dollar. Brazilian real down 70% against the dollar. So all of their U.S. held debt is now 1,000 times more than what they'd planned. Okay, it's multiples, many multiples of what they can handle, and they're about to all default. Argentina is $70 billion in debt. Ukraine $20 billion. That doesn't include the other, all the $70 billion in military assistance. They're never going to be able to pay it back. Ecuador $17 billion. Egypt $16 billion. So we've just gone through another cheap money credit cycle where none of these countries would get loans except Wall Street's handing them loans because they know they'll get bailed out by the Fed. Okay, so it's a complete distortion of global credit. Now, when global credit collapses, that's what you got to look out for, because the U.S. economy, I mentioned how private equity has just gutted it. It's built on finance, okay? Nobody wants to sell you furniture. They want to finance you furniture. No one wants to sell you a car. They want to lease you a car, okay? It's all based on this backbone of no interest money. This is all coming to an end. Rents now, we just came out recently on Zero Hedge, 41% of commercial businesses can't afford rent, okay? Some of the other startling things in the credit market, which I came across recently, 20% of public companies are now considered zombie. So what does that mean? Zombie companies, they're basically calling them companies that can't handle their interest payments. Keep in mind, they took massive loans at 0%. These have to be rolled over at 7%. Okay, 20% of these guys are going to go down. You're going to see mass carnage in public companies. You know, we're going to see everyone stripped to the bare waist here and see who can make money and who can not, who can run a business and who can not. Okay, more defaults are coming. I mentioned private equity. I mentioned venture capital. We're moving from 2008, too big to fail, to 2023, too big to bail. Okay, the Fed, there is no solution anymore. The solution for the last 2 decades is print more money. You can't print more money in an era of inflation. Yet we're going to try. We're going to do it, and you're going to see the end of the fiat currency system, just like every other fiat currency system has collapsed. So I'm expecting for 2023 a severe recession in the EU. That's because their business model is still gone. They have enough gas reserves for the winter. They got their gas reserves filled up, but they're paying 10x. They paid 10x for that, for what they normally would. Consumers in Europe are paying 3 times that, and it's only going to get worse. They haven't fixed the business model. The cheap Russian gas is not there anymore. So next year's going to be even worse. Germany Inc. has been laid bare. They can't make chemicals. They can't make glass. They can't make steel, aluminum. All of the things are highly, highly dependent on energy. Okay, as you may know, I ran a Taiwanese steel conglomerate. My electrical bill for melting steel there was $300,000 a month, and that was just a small operation. Okay, so 30% of your costs in some of these industries is your electricity price. Okay, when that goes up 5x, you're done. And you just saw the giant aluminium smelter in Slovakia close its doors forever. Said we're out. French glassmaker said we're taking all the winter off. We're closing down. The big news, Stellantis, which was the former French Peugeot car maker, they own Chrysler, Peugeot, a bunch of former big brands. Stellantis said we got to get out of the EU. So most of the EU car industry shifted to Eastern Europe years ago for the cheap labor. Okay, they're in Hungary, they're in Poland, they're in Romania, Czech Republic. All of that's gone now. They don't have gas. They don't have electricity. You can't make cars without electricity. You can't make components without electricity. They're literally saying we're going to get out of Europe. Okay, this is a massive deindustrialization of the European economy. This is what wealth is created on. It's created on productivity and know-how and technology and productive output. Okay, that's going away now. It's going to be a giant old folks home with the welfare state. Okay, Europe is in big, big trouble. The whole world's in big trouble. U.S., we're also seeing in the Northeast 80% increases in natural gas for heating. So unless we get a real focus on productive economics real fast, something similar to the CHIPS bill, but it's got to be all across the whole board, we're going to be in some big, big trouble in terms of the macro environment. I think 2023 is going to just get worse. You may see pops in the stock market because it's been so bad now, and you're going to see, just like '08, bad news in the real economy is going to be good news for the stock market because they think the Fed will pull back on tightening. The problem is the genie's out of the bottle. We have the inflation problem now. This is not 2008. Nothing ever repeats exactly like it is. We always look to the last crisis, the last war to predict what's going to happen now. It's always different. So that's the macro environment. Next segment, we are going to cover the FTX Ponzi scheme fraud, which is absolutely scandalous. We're going to cover the collapse of the Mexico shadow banking system. This ties into the credit markets, a $5 billion blow up that actually nobody's been reporting on. And then we're going to talk about the Russia-Ukraine war situation, all in the next segment of Chaos Inc. We'll see in a bit. Okay, guys, what I want to get into now is the FTX Ponzi collapse. This is the crypto exchange led by SBF, Sam Friedman Bankman, whatever his name is. Never believed in this guy. He came out of nowhere. I thought this was strange. And this is really one area to watch. I know a lot of my listeners are crypto people. I'm big into crypto, as you probably saw me from Max Kaiser's show. I'm the board of a couple Bitcoin companies. I am generally a Bitcoin maximalist. Although I have dabbled in the crypto space in other areas and lost extensive amounts of money at it. I had a Bitcoin mine, very large Bitcoin mine years back. Closed it, lost all my money on that. Probably the only person to ever lose serious money in a Bitcoin mine. Until now, they're struggling. So I do know a lot about Bitcoin mining. And I know a little bit about the space. I've been in it since 2018 or so. This is a shock. Okay, has really nothing to do with Bitcoin. Okay, none of these Ponzi scheme shit coins have nothing to do with Bitcoin. Go back and read the white paper. This is a real invention. This is a real area of human progress. If we continue on that course with just Bitcoin, get a whole wallet, hold your own Bitcoin, hold your keys. Anytime you trust third-party companies, especially in the crypto space, things have gone bad, okay? There are very few reputable companies that I would recommend to work with in the Bitcoin space. This situation, this guy, SBF, created basically a Ponzi scheme, and he never had any money. And at one time, he was valued at $30 billion. This was none of his own money. This was all investors' money, okay? He created a hedge fund with zero controls on it, 10 of them living in an apartment, all together, all kinds of dodgy stuff going on. He then borrows all the money against the user's assets after they spun up an exchange, donated. What's really shocking is, as they're going bankrupt, he took user money and sent out $70 million in the last 18 months to politicians. Okay, he's trying to buy his freedom here, and it looks like he has, because it's hardly gotten covered. Okay, this money needs to go back to the rightful owners. He didn't invest his money. He transferred users' money as he's going bankrupt to mostly Democratic politicians. There's a few Republicans in there. If you don't see this money go back to investors, and if you don't see him locked up, then it's game over for the country. We've passed the third world country status. I mean, you wouldn't get this kind of scam out of the worst third world country. I mean, this is outrageous. So watch the FTX scam. Any of you that lost money, I'm sorry about that. Hopefully you can get your money back, at least some of it. But be very careful in the crypto space. My long term, I still think we go easily back to $50,000. Whether that's next year or a year later, I don't know. But you have to trust in the mathematics. There's only 21 million, probably 17 million left that people haven't lost keys for. And just focus on that. I think you're going to see institutional money is going to hold out on crypto for a while. Okay, they've been spooked, and you're going to see the country try to take over the digital money space with the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies. But Bitcoin's going to be out there fighting for freedom and fighting for personal individuals and liberty. And it's going to be about having freedom, owning your own currency. Everything you have now in the bank is a liability to someone else, okay? Let's not hope the credit system doesn't end up in bank wipeouts, because we could end up there. And if they have to print enough money to cover everybody, then God knows what the value of the dollar will be. So that's what I'll say on the FTX and SBF fiasco. It's got crypto markets down about 16,000 for Bitcoin. Everything else has been shellacked, 80 to 90%. I think it's too early to speculate on it. Or it may be a good time. I don't know. Follow your. Don't take my advice on any of this stuff. But back on the crypto markets, we've also had a blow up on the credit markets. We've had a blow up that not many people are talking about, which is the Mexican shadow banking system that has completely imploded. So to the tune of $5 billion. We had a company called Alpha Credit go bankrupt in Mexico. They had $5 billion in foreign bond holdings outstanding. These guys do payday loans. They do business equipment loans. There's basically 3 large companies in Mexico that have now gone bankrupt. These were fintech darlings. Credit Real, Unifin. Unifin was the largest lender in business equipment. They're bankrupt. Bank of America has downgraded the entire sector, okay, because what happens is these guys start making loans at very high rates. The payday rates, payroll rates were 53%, okay, interest. But eventually they keep to grow, and they get to take all this investment, they have to grow. Even SoftBank put in $125 million into one of these companies. And that was in Alpha Credit. They have to keep growing, so they make more loans, and the quality of loans go bad. Okay, and they got overstretched, and all of a sudden, turns out the accounting wasn't up to speed, and they end up taking massive holes in their balance sheets and going out of business. The entire sector's been downgraded. Fintech is very dodgy sector. You've seen it blow up in Mexico. You're probably going to see that sector blow up all across the world, right? I mean, this quantitative tightening has moved to the most speculative, to the base of industries. It started in NFTs. It went to crypto. It's gone to the tech stock darlings. It's now like a tsunami wave heading for the rest of the sector. The last on that list will be housing, because housing always has a lag. But that's already going down. The pricing's going down. If we get into a credit market dump, watch out below. I think that's when you'll see interest rates. The Fed's caught in a rock and a hard place. If you really have to bail out the economy, it's impossible with 10% inflation. Okay, so you can't just keep printing money to bail out the housing market or bail out private companies. We're going into too big to fail 2023, as I mentioned. Okay, so this segment we're going to keep going here. We're going to talk about the Russia-Ukraine war, which is an area that we cover on the show quite extensively. What's happened recently? So the Russians have pulled back from Kherson. Kherson is a Russian city. It's at the south end of the Dnieper River. Follow a map of the Ukraine. Kherson is the Ukraine. It controls the south exit of the Dnieper River. Okay, there's an east bank and a west bank. The Russians controlled both banks, and now they pull back from the west bank. Temporary setback for the Russians. However, they couldn't hold it. Okay, they couldn't get enough men and material there in time to hold it. The Ukrainians would have took it back. The Russians made a smart move to save troops, pulled their line to the east of the river. The east bank of the Kherson area has a higher level than the west bank. So as the Ukrainians move into the west bank of Kherson, they're going to be in immediate fire artillery range of the Russians in the east bank. Okay, the Russians will hold the east bank, guaranteed. They won't give that up. They're continuing to make pushes in the Donetsk to clean all that area up. And as you see, you'll see here a map of the electrical grid of the Ukraine. It's completely gone. Stoltenberg, the NATO chief, said that Ukraine has a terrifying winter ahead, which is absolutely the case. Okay, why we didn't see this coming is beyond me. It was never mentioned. The first thing the U.S. did in the Iraq War is take out the electrical grid. We took it out in 2 weeks, and 85% of electricity was gone. Okay, that should be modus operandi for modern warfare. The Russians didn't do it. The Russians came in with a special military operation with kid gloves, I think they thought they'd win hearts and minds by not going full on out. That changed after the first couple phases of this war. Where we're at today, Ukraine has 30% of the electrical grid left. Complete disaster. Most of these people live in apartment blocks. How are the elderly going to get up to the 22nd floor with no elevator? Okay, there's no running water, there's no heat. You can't survive in the apartment blocks. They're going to have to burn firewood for the winter. You're going to see there's already 10 million Ukrainians that have left. You're going to see another 10 million leave. Ukraine's going to be empty. Okay, and this what you see in every engagement is you see the missiles come in, they take out the electrical grid, and then the ground forces move in. That's what the new 300,000 mobilized troops, Russian troops, are for. I think you're going to see them fake another time in Kiev up through Belarus. They're going to hold troops there, the Ukrainian troops in Kiev. They're going to come down, retake Kherson, and then just keep marching into Odessa and on all the way to Moldova. Moldova, on the map you see, they are trying to flip, the Russians are trying to flip Moldova right now politically. And they may do it. There's people on the streets. They have no heat. All of Moldovan electricity was getting electricity from Ukraine. Not a smart move. Just complete, this president of Moldova is taking her lessons from and instructions from NATO and the WEF, and just completely not protecting her own people. So Moldova may politically flip. Then you're going to have a complete Russian axis through the south of the country. Ukraine will be all but done in name. I think he leaves West Ukraine and leaves Kiev, and you're going to have Ukrainians on the left side of the Dnieper and Russians on the right side of the Dnieper River. So what's happening? Europeans have transferred transformers into the Ukraine, about 200. They're doing what they can, but if you know about electrical infrastructure, the facilities just don't exist to rebuild an entire country's network the size of the Ukraine. Okay, Ukraine is going to be third world for a decade plus. Okay, the transformers, the substations, the power plants, the nuclear plants had to go offline. They can't send the electricity anywhere, right? This is a network. You start to reroute it. Some areas of the network overload at the substations and the transformer levels. It's a complete disaster. We have gotten Ukraine destroyed. Okay, without the electricity, nothing's running. The subways, the metros aren't running. This is an economy killer, taking out the electrical grid. Okay, you're going to start to find frozen bodies in apartment blocks. Okay, and I want to say, just take a minute and just say this is a human tragedy. We should all, and nobody's taking sides in this. We shouldn't be taking sides. We should be taking the humanitarian side that saves lives and avoided this conflict from the beginning, instead of trying to push NATO and overthrow Putin to gain access to Russian resources. This is all the fault of the U.S. deep state. Country after country, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, we go, we see, we destroy, and we leave it in a tatters. Okay, it's time for a gut check in the U.S. foreign policy establishment. Okay. So Putin has obviously outwitted us again. He saved destroying the electrical grid for wintertime. We didn't see it coming. Duh. So there's been too much. Where do we go in the future? As I mentioned, I see the battle attack plan happening through the south coast again as the mobilized forces come in. Russia spent too much blood and treasure now to give it up. They're going to make sure there is a safe space between the Sevastopol-based Black Sea Fleet and NATO. Okay, that's all they've wanted from the beginning, and that's what they're going to demand. If that requires pushing all the Ukraine, they may do that, because there's not going to be anyone left in the country. So watch for the Kherson to Odessa. He who holds Kherson controls the Dnieper. He who controls the Dnieper controls the Ukraine. You have to ship all the commodities and the grain and the metals from the north to the south through the Dnieper out into global markets. Watch Turkey in this space. Turkey has a gas hub now, which is going to be a global gas hub. They're making strides geopolitically. They have a military base in Qatar with 5,000 Turkish troops. They've restarted this North Syria operations. They are not acting very NATO. Okay, this is a country that could flip into the Russia, China, Ukraine, Saudi Arabia axis. You have an axis now globally building up, a BRICS axis. You could call it a BRICS axis, and it's basically the rest of the world against the West. Okay, and the West is becoming poorer and poorer, and becoming more and more overstretched, trying to do everything through the military instead of through raw economic power. Okay, we no longer have the raw economic power. Chinese EVs are now 50% of EV production globally. Go to the Oslo airport in Norway, you see Chinese EVs for sale. They're taking over the world. Okay, Volkswagen, these guys are struggle to compete. They're not going to be able to compete. How you get wealthy is having a real economic base producing goods the rest of the world wants to buy. Okay, and the U.S. has let the industry rot, and we no longer have an industrial base. As I mentioned many times, I've been talking about it for 10, 15 years since I was in China. going on the Max Kaiser Report show, and we have people in the United States in powerful positions that have never set foot on a factory floor. They've spent their entire lives in think tanks. They don't understand economic development. They don't understand how to build wealth, real wealth, not paper wealth. They do understand to get on the boards of gas companies in Ukraine, how to siphon off money through political connection to offshore companies. They know that. They have all the companies set up. I mean, my God. I mean, if you look at the list of politicians and the things they do is just dirty. It's just unbelievable. And how it goes from here, I don't know. It's anyone to say, but I'll keep bringing you the episodes. I'll keep bringing you the macro, the Russia, Ukraine, the China. By the way, China, the KMT in Taiwan just won huge elections. The Taiwan president just resigned. This is huge for peace and stability in Taiwan. Straight. I have Taiwanese friends, billionaires. They're furious with the foreign policy establishment in the U.S. because it's constant war, talk of war, how to fight China. We got to fight China. They don't want to get killed. They don't want to be the next Ukrainians. Peace and stability. They want the status quo. Okay, if the best case for peace in the East is the status quo in Taiwan. It's not saying you're going to go fight China because that is a red line for mainland China. They will attack Taiwan if you push it. If they have to invade Taiwan, they will. And that is an absolute red line. We can't militarily defend Taiwan, unfortunately, at this point, and Taiwan will tell you the same thing. Okay? Every war game the Pentagon has run for 10 years shows them losing Taiwan. And guess what? And I've talked about it before. If the boats from China stop showing up in the port of Long Beach, every consumer good will vanish from American stores. Then you're going to have absolute chaos like you've never seen. Chaos, that's the channel. Tell your friends about it. Subscribe. We'll keep bringing you the content. Take care. Have a good week. See you next time.